as to prepare to go down memory lane a little bit because you've been in Overwatch like for the longest time. I was rewatching Apex Season 3 finals, and there was one peculiar thing about that. I completely didn't remember this happening, but it kind of honestly really worked in that.
Is it the suits?
I mean, the suits.
I think those suits worked.
Yeah. I mean, they were not as, let's say, special as the suits we see now on the Overwatch League desk. I'm talking about you, Uber. But the situation that you guys found yourself in is that you had a TriCast. So I think it was Wolf and Papa Smithy at the time, and then you, right?
Correct.
And for myself, I actually asked myself, because, for instance, if we go to European football, it's very often the case that you just have one guy talking, and then maybe sometimes you will have a second player. For American sports, it's different. Why did we settle on 2 casts? Doesn't three casts work just as well?
So, to my knowledge, this is the only TriCast that has ever occurred in professional Overwatch to this day, and it was years ago now at this point. But I don't think it's ever been replicated. I don't think it's ever been attempted to happen again. I guess the closest thing that we have is like a Vast Coast stream where there's 9 of us in a room yelling and just shit talking each other and whatnot the whole way through. But yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, and I think that that's the main reason why nobody else has really wanted to do it. Especially like Blizzard hasn't wanted to do it. No other tournaments that were running back in those days wanted to do it because it is a bit daunting. TriCast has just been the standard in Korea forever. You look at League of Legends, every single day there are 3 commentators on the Korean side of things. English has 2 until you get to the playoffs. Maybe in the semifinals you had 3, but the finals in Korea, like, you pretty much would always have 3 commentators. Up until that Apex Season 3, there was only 2 English commentators, and that was Monte Cristo and Noah. So there wasn't that third person that could have slotted in. I think that if myself, Wolf, Papa Smithy, if any of us had been doing Overwatch at that point, we probably still would have had a 3-person desk, and we could have had it multiple seasons in a row. But it's really challenging with a game like Overwatch. There's already such a strange balance of power, and it's a discussion that you have to have often, I think, with your co-caster, especially if you're like a play-by-play of, how much room do you need? Do you need more space? Am I talking too long? Am I holding these fights too long? If this goes on for more than like a minute, do you want to come in and cover this like overtime fight that might be happening on the point? You have to figure out like what you want to do. And that's what we had to do with the TriCast, because there's obviously still a lot of action. Like, the game has gotten faster paced compared to like back in the Apex days, because people have just had more of a mastery of the game now. There's a lot of more characters, obviously, as well, that have been added in. There's a lot more mobility. So the game has naturally just become faster. But even back in Apex Season 3, you're talking about like Nano Genji meta and all this kind of stuff. Like, things were flying quickly. So figuring out like, how much do I get to talk? Do I just shut up the entire time when there's no action happening and let them occupy everything? Do I hand over some of the play-by-play to them for moments? How do we want to distribute this? That's like the first time I'd say that I have ever done a practice cast ahead of like a finals match or anything like that. Like, oftentimes you talk about the things that I just mentioned, like, how do you want to do this? What is the story going to look like? How do we want to frame things for this? That's just a normal discussion to have, but that was the first time that we actually sat down, watched VODs, and casted it, and just tried to figure out like how it was going to function with 3. And I don't think that any of us were like that great at casting Overwatch compared to like where we ended up at that time. But I think for the time in that context, I think that we killed it. I think that there's a couple trip ups, but that's naturally going to occur when you're trying something so new. But I think for the most part, we managed to nail it. And I would love to go back and revisit trying to doing a TriCast in the future. I think it would be a wonderful little experiment. I don't think it would become the norm by any means, but I think it would be really neat, and it would add something a bit different. Where everything is widely just kind of uniform. We just always have the twos. Maybe sometimes somebody's sick or has to miss a day, so you have somebody else fill in, and that's when you get like the sideshow and Custa cast or whatever, or Custa and Mitch are casting together, so you just get the Australian duo going on. But aside from that, like, you just see the same pairs all the time. I think it'd be fun for like a final or the semis. Like, let's throw a third person in there. Let's test people. Let's push it a little bit, and just change it up because it can be really fun if you figure it out.
It also seems like Overwatch is a game where there's so much to say about the strategy, theoretically speaking, that
Yeah.
especially to color commentators or to analysts, will have different views necessarily on the game. So, for instance, someone like, let's say you bring someone like a Vastin, of course he has a support-centric viewpoint, while someone like Johnny would probably have more of a tank view, right?
Sure.
And like sort of aligning, and maybe someone is more focused on, let's say, ult economy and whatnot. I feel like this is sort of established in other esports where, for instance, we have like people that are very draft focused in others, or like very focused on the shop in League of Legends or whatnot, right? Like losing at the at the shop. So I feel like if you were to combine these, is it necessarily the case that probably like two color commentators would be preferable over two play-by-plays in a TriCast?
Yeah, I think that would be like the delegation of who's talking is already so limited. And somewhat, I guess, like not necessarily naturally, but like with a game like Overwatch, there is so much action. So there would be a decent amount of it to kind of split between the two play by plays, but I feel like the lone analyst would have way too much stuff to try to cover. Because you have to be listening to what both the play by plays are saying, take that in because you often you want to kind of bridge off of what they're saying and then go into something. So you're like listening to two different people in like one team fight. So it's not necessarily going to flow as cleanly as you might expect. So like when the handoff comes to you as an analyst, like it could be a little awkward, and then you have to go in, try to dive into your analysis and get set up before the next play-by-play wants to start talking again. I think it's a lot easier for a play-by-play to just kind of sit back and let the analyst do a little bit of extra fill. But the other thing is, like you mentioned, having those kind of two different perspectives can really add to the depth of the cast. For us, like Papa Smithy, I'd say at that time he's just naturally like very gifted at getting a good read on the game and like what people are trying to do. And like Wolf is obviously just like one of the best like story keepers out there. Like he knows everything about every single player. He knows their histories, the history of the venue that you're in. Like he is so good at just keeping this immense amount of knowledge in his brain. So for that TriCast, we had like Papa Smithy, who was really great at like what the teams were going to try to set up and yada yada yada, and then Wolf like really bringing the heavy story elements and whatnot. It was just this perfect balance, I think, because they're both like so good at both of the like in both of those regards. But like I think at that point in time, that was their primary strengths, and it was just this great balance of just weaving the story in, talking about like then Papa Smithy comes in and he's like, this is where they failed in the past. This is the thing that they've needed to work on. It's been like the biggest thing that's been haunting them. Yada yada yada. And then just this nice back and forth, and I could just sit there and like sprinkle in some stuff, and then we get into the game, and I'll do the action, and then they'll talk about like the mechanical mistakes, and then Wolf's telling like the overarching story of what's been going on in this map. It was just like this perfect flow, and I think that if you can have those kind of crossed, like not cross perspectives, but the specialities, I guess, from the analyst side, having two is just so perfect. I just wish it wasn't so damn difficult to figure out to put it into action in Overwatch. But maybe it's something for the future. Who knows?
For sure. Now, sort of like wanting to go down memory lane, I don't want to discredit the the Gosu Weeklies or whatever. But let's be honest, like professional Overwatch felt like it started in Apex with like professional teams. They were all going full time. It was a league properly run, right? You guys were in the studio. That's sort of like where professional Overwatch started, at least for me, I will say. So I thought it would be interesting to sort of like look at I would say 3 different eras. So Apex, and then eventually Overwatch League Season 1 and 2, where we were in one studio, and then Overwatch League Season 3 and 4, where it was remote. We also had hero pools, which changed a little bit of the experience, and sort of like see what were the best points at these different junctures. So when you think back on the Apex era, Do you feel like that was already a really good start, and it's like maybe there's a couple of things from back then that we probably could further adapt into what or learn from in nowadays game?
Ooh,
I mean, we have the
I think
TriCast, right?
I mean, there's a lot. Like, there's the TriCast. I mean, there's so many things that like I would love to see that just can't happen right now.
Mhm.
Like just that style of tournament again.
Right.
Would be amazing to see. But that's only really possible in like the contender scene, I suppose, where like one region's going to host you. You bring in 4 import squads to try to take over the region,
Mhm.
and you see how it shakes out. Um, like that's why seeing the international play in Overwatch League is was so fun whenever like the Hawaii matches and whatnot were going to happen, and then you go into the playoffs and whatnot. It was so great because like everybody's just kind of like locked into their region, just given the circumstances. So it sucks not being able to have more crossplay because it makes that idea of like, what if we brought 4 teams from NA and EU over to Korea and they played like that? Just it sounds so mind blowing now, like to think back on it, but it's like, but that's what this league was supposed to be. But because of COVID, we don't have it. It just sucks, kind of what has happened, unfortunately. Like the start of the homestands when we did the feud that we did at the beginning of 2020, they were awesome. Like going to Philly and casting there, like that, because that's like basically like not hometown, but like that's where I went to college for a period of time. So being able to go there and finally do an event in Philly was awesome. Going to Houston was awesome. Was awesome, but unfortunately, it just didn't really get to shake out. But like, I would love to, I guess, just see that come back. I'm basically just saying, like, I want COVID to go away so we can have international travel and competitive play again. That's nothing. That's not a revelation by any means, but um, I think it just shows how direly I miss that. But other things, I guess, is just how to develop content around player personality. This is something that I've been crying for in like especially like Valorant out here. Now that we're back in like the OGN studio, I would love to see OGN style content come back as well. And I would love to see more of that in Overwatch League. Because there's when you have so many players who are being brought up from contenders, like, yeah, there's going to be people out there who have watched every single game of competitive Overwatch that's happened, whether it's in contenders or
Yeah.
Overwatch. Like there are these people who just have all the time in the world. They sit there, they watch them, or they make time to watch VODs. And those people are amazing for keeping themselves so well informed. They're more well informed than I am, but for sure. Um, but one of the things that I want to see is like content that really promotes the personalities of these new players. And it's another one of those things where, yeah, it's very difficult to get that done because we are not in a studio, because we cannot just go to these players and record something with them because they are spread out across the world. They are maybe not able to be reached or contacted because it's not safe because of COVID. But I would love to see, just even if it's sat down, webcam on, like you and I are doing right here, some content that really highlights the personalities of the players. I think back to the Apex karaoke videos. Like those were so fun, and they made you care about players that you would not necessarily have cared about, if you didn't watch that video. Like maybe you're like a really big fan of this player, and you see that he's in this karaoke video, so like, oh, I'm gonna watch it, and you end up watching the whole thing, and now it's like, oh, actually, I really care about all of these players now because they show their personality. This guy can sing really well. This guy's a rap god. That's awesome. And then you start building this familiarity and this care for the players. I'd love to see more personality driven content.
I have this theory that part of why Apex was also more successful in telling these stories is also because team profiles seemed probably more pronounced. We have a couple of counterexamples with like Chengdu of the past where they chose
Mhm.
alternative strategies. But if you thought about like what the tournament format and the really like infrequency of games for each team sort of facilitated, it's really hard being a meta Athena in 2022, right? Like finding out new
Yes.
boosts and whatnot like every week and entertain an audience. Now we have like we had 40
That's saying hello.
we had like 40 matches in the first season. Of course, we
Yeah.
sort of like slowed down, but still, like, I mean, there was an absolute shock for like players from Apex coming here playing 40 matches. The preparation was very different. Do you think there's something about the mode of the competition sort of like changing how narratives shake out?
Um, yeah, I mean, for sure. Like anything that you do, any changes that you make, whether it's a reduction of games or whatnot, that's all going to have a ripple effect. So it definitely all does come together. Um, I would love because you just bring it to my brain because you're mentioning Meta Athena, which is not something that I hear about very frequently, but it's something that I think back on very fondly. Um, I wish we could see some more innovation like that. I think that that is actually something that we can look forward to with Overwatch 2. Obviously, there's new maps, so there's always going to be things that are figured out as new heroes are added to the game. There's going to be a lot of crazy tech and things that people figure out. So I'm looking forward to seeing teams do innovation like that, and I hope that we do get a lot more of it. I don't think it's quite gonna be like this one team, like Medellin, just consistently comes up with these crazy wild strats, all these boosts. This is how you get around the back of Dorado with nobody even seeing you. Um, I think it's gonna be scattered amongst all the teams. Obviously, there's so many more players now who are assessing the game and trying to figure these things out. But that's something that I do really, really look forward to. So hopefully, people can get the thinking caps on and come up with some wild stuff. Because I think like the last truly innovative thing that I can think of, like that was a highlight moment, like that Meta Athena boost, was probably what Atlanta Rain season 2 doing the grav boost over the top of Hollywood. Like
True.
that's the last like crazy innovative play that I can really think of in my brain. So we're long overdue for it. I think I got sidetracked from what your actual question was because I
No,
was
but
so excited about the prospect of that.
yeah,
But yeah, I hope to God that we start getting some more crazy highlight plays like that.
for sure. And yeah, it's really hard from a league standpoint to hit all the keynotes that you want with your stream metrics, but also like facilitate an environment where people can experiment. And
Yeah.
probably, as you said, it's probably now the best position to be in. Now, it like for you? I imagine
Say
like,
hello. Say hello, Nova.
oh yeah, we got okay. She did very good. Um, so you come from Apex, and then suddenly you get. I mean, it must have been like feeling like I forget what the volume was for like you specifically casting, but it must have felt like at least the players are playing tons of games. Is that just a different experience of broadcasting, so to speak? In like the difference between seeing Lunatic High maybe like 8 matches a season, or which
Mhm.
would then translate into like 16 times a year, into seeing them with stage playoffs, let's say 50 times. Are you sitting there going like, okay, I kind of told these guys about that narrative already. Now I gotta sort of like find something new.
Yeah. That's 40 was way too many games. Obviously I wasn't casting during that season, but I can
Yep.
imagine that it was grueling. And I know that it was grueling because I remember casting Shanghai's first win.
Yes.
And every single caster came up to Wolf and I and they said, I'm allowed to curse on this show, right?
Go ahead.
All right. They said, fuck you. Like I was like, whoa, like why? And they're like, we had to deal with 0-40 Shanghai, talk about them all of last season, and then you come in and they get their win and you get to cast it. Fuck you. Like it can be grueling. Like not just not only for the audience to be like, oh God, we're watching this team lose all the time, or maybe it's the inverse of that. Maybe it's the
Right.
team that is just constantly destroying people. Nobody can touch them. Um, kind of like your Titans and Shock of season 2, like, they would just destroy just about everybody until they matched up against each other, and then it was this big clash. Um, like it can be boring to just watch a team kind of like style on people the whole way through when there's not like any stiff competition. It really sucks. We had that kind of somewhat for like the beginning of last year in Valorant out here with Vision Strikers just kind of rolling everybody until they lost. And when that happened, it was this huge moment, much like when Shanghai won theirs. You can exhaust your storylines when you have these teams that are playing so many games. The thing that you need, like if we were still going to have a 40 match season for every single team, it would need to be just crazy patches that are swinging the meta all of the time, because if the power balance like widely remains the same and we're not seeing like any crazy moments happen and whatnot, and we're not seeing these new heroes being picked, or like these niche scenarios coming out where they do something or they pick something and it's like really crazy, it would just be so damn boring. to just do everything as it is every single time. It's the whole way through. It's just the same thing, you know. While we didn't have 40 matches in season two, we kind of had that stagnation with goats. It was just goats all the time, and you had the two teams that were the best. You had the Shock, you had the Titans. And it's like I can only discuss them destroying people so many times. Wolf can only talk about like the player history coming from Apex, playing in contenders, the road to Runaway getting their first victory in season two of 2018 contenders. Like we can only go through that so many times before we're like, are we like, am I losing my fucking mind? Or like, are we just saying the same things over and over again every time we step up to cast these guys? Um, it can really be tough to come up with fresh narratives and interesting things to say without just repeating, and it just drives you crazy as a caster because like we want nothing more than to entertain and inform people. And when we start hitting that point where like I think I've already said this, like I think I've said it 4 times, like you just feel like you're going mad. So I'm thank God we don't have that.
It feels like one of the major tasks that you guys often have to do is like fill the air, so to speak. So not only do you now have to find new talking points, what if production messes up? Suddenly, like you have, or there's a technical pause or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Like, where do you find it in your soul to, or where do you find the content for that?
It is again another reason why improv classes are a very good thing because when you're going through those technical pauses, um like anything that comes to your brain, basically you're throwing it out there as long as it's broadcast friendly. You're like, just send it. Just we need to have something to talk about. And hopefully you throw out a topic and it's something that you can lead you on this path that fills 10-15 minutes depending on how long the pause is. I think everybody is very well aware that like I am very cursed when it comes to pauses. Wolf as well. We went through so many. We had obviously had the Uncle pause. We had the
Yes.
I think it was Coma on Kongzi Panthera season 2 of Contenders 2018, where we had this pause that occurred in the very last team fight on Oasis. It
Oh,
went on for so long that the game lobby ended up closing, and the match result had to be awarded to a team. It was the first
yeah.
and only time it's ever happened. We had to cast through all of that. There was the pause at World Cup Incheon. I forget which teams were playing, but we had a really long pause there. I want to say it was like Finland and somebody else. And then I've had a multitude of them in Valorant, as well as my very long pause in LCK with Monte Cristo. And that kind of brings me to the beginning of it all. Like that was the first real experience that I had with having to fill air, just dead air. It was an hour and 45 minutes long. Fortunately, I was there with Monte Cristo, who he and I have like an easy enough time of just being able to keep a conversation and keep things going. But I was so young in my casting career. I was within like first 4 months of doing professional commentary, and I get hit with an hour and 45-minute long pause. Anytime I get put into a situation where I'm like, we're gonna have to fill for a really long time, which has already happened this year in Valorant, twice in 1 week I had it. I think back to that pause and I'm like, thank God that happened to me so early on because now I know what to expect, which is to expect nothing. You have to just expect that it's not going to be fixed. If you keep being like, should only be about 10 more minutes, like you're gonna run out of steam. You end up just killing yourself at that point because you just will exhaust everything, and you'll just give up hope. Like you just need to expect that it's never going to be fixed, so that when it does get fixed, it's a godsend. And you're just constantly basically prepping for things to discuss. Like anything that comes to your brain realistically is ammunition at that point, and you just need to be able to send it and have a conversation about it. I remember during that coma pause in 2018, Wolf and I, we ended up talking about the Page Master, which is like an animated cross live action movie from the 90s starring Christopher Lloyd and I think Macaulay Culkin. Like we talked
Okay.
about the Page Master for like 25 minutes, and it just came up because he said something and it made me think of like a line from the movie and whatnot. Like anything like that in that moment is just like, just send it. And with Wolf, with Avril, with Paper Thin, who's my co-caster in Valorant, like they know, like you throw something out there, we are going to discuss it. You don't just shut down like, I don't want to talk about that. You go into it because like we need to have a conversation about this. We need to continue to be entertaining. And that's that improv rule. Don't say no. You just go with the flow.
Is there any utility in having like smash window if something happens type of topic? Like,
Um, that has occurred, I guess, in the past. I wouldn't say that I have anything like constantly locked and loaded where it's like in case of pause, like, start telling this story. I guess I kind of have a little bit of fun in Valorant now because I was starting to tell a story, um, and then the pause like was fixed, and everybody was like, I want to hear about this. I want to hear about this ski trip. It was like a ski trip story or something. They're like, I want to hear about the ski trip. The chat was like talking about that, but so I'm like, I guess I could always go back to the ski trip, but that's not something that I could do, if I'm casting Overwatch or any other game because no one will know what the hell context I'm talking
right.
about. So not really. But just like any funny stories, especially like self-deprecating ones, as long as like I said, they're broadcast friendly, like those are always ones that keep the audience entertained. Self-depreciation will never not be fun, I suppose. So anything like that that's like remotely embarrassing, but appropriate is always good to throw out there.
Sweet. Now, I think like one last topic we should probably talk about is last season in terms of I I frequently hear from Abel that you guys were sort of cursed with the Valiant games. I think you.
Yeah, we cast the majority of them.
Yes, I think you just about at least an incredible amount.
I think we cast like one more than half.
Right, right. Is there like one game that stands out that they played where you went like, okay, that one wasn't? Did you guys end up casting the Philly game?
Um,
The
I
map?
don't think we did.
Oh, Jesus Christ! You even missed this one. Okay.
I think that I could be wrong about this. Honestly, like anything with the Valiant from last year is just a blur. I think my brain just it was just like, okay, it's time to do a disk cleanup. We're purging the system. And it just deleted most of those from my brain. But think we actually missed that one because I think that this was a point of pain for me at Avril because we are like the one Valiant game that we don't cast, and it's the one where they like deny Fusion from going to a tournament. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's how that transpired. So even that was like frustrating. Like it just sucks. It's like I'm getting pissed about this team and I'm not even casting them right now. Like I'm still being tormented by this squad. Like why do we have to suffer?
The fun thing about the situation right now is it's kind of unfortunate, but it also has some upsides in that there's a regional split, and necessarily as talent is also then regionally split. And as you described, like it's not possible to watch all the games, especially with different time zones. Like yes, you could watch VODs, but it's better to catch the big major storylines. But there's a noticeable divide. It's not like the NA guys watch all the APAC teams right all the time. So there seems to be like this difference in evaluation. Did you always think like whenever Shanghai is going to come over at these NA teams, it's just going to be like lights out and this team's just like built different while everyone else was sort of like, cows fuel.
Yeah, it can be tough for people to tell, I guess, because when you are divided across like a region like that, like obviously you want to big up your region a lot. You see it in every single sport, every single game that's out there. Like when you go to Masters in Valorant, like of course I'm cheering on the Vision Strikers and I'm bigging them up. I'm like, oh yeah, they're gonna be able to take this whole thing. Like anybody who thinks otherwise is an idiot. Like Vision Strikers is gonna roll them. That's mostly like that was mostly from like the banter side of things. So it can be difficult to distinguish. With Shanghai, I was fully confident. Like not only was I like just trying to poke and prod at NA and be like, oh yeah, you guys are gonna get clapped. But I did truly believe it. They just looked a cut above everybody else. The squad that the squad that they had last season, it was just so nasty. Like no, like basically nobody could hold a candle to any of the players that were in that role. I'd say other than maybe like Leave. Leave is like the one person who wasn't on Shanghai that was like, damn, like if he joined that squad, that might make them slightly better. But every other person in their role was just so on point, so impressive. Yeah, I was fully sold from the get go. As soon as we started seeing them play, it's like, yep, they're gonna do just fine.
Right. Now, I guess as a closing question, I wonder then, because like in the other games that you've cast, there seems to be this regionalization, and honestly, it's working pretty well. just because like you have the different camps and everyone's cheering for their own region. So I'm thinking about Masters, like the near airport memes are flying around, like that type of rivalry and like banter
Yep.
exists there. And we pretty much got this really only because of the division eventually, and the discourse happening there. Do you think what works better? Just like having everyone in a pool and just playing, and then even if you're playing internationally and flying around like we initially intended with the Overwatch League, or would you, if you could bankroll the Overwatch League, would you just say, okay, I want every team, every region to have a bunch of teams, and then eventually once or twice a year we meet each other and figure out who has the best idea about the game?
Oh, it's difficult to say which I prefer, just because we didn't get to see how it was all going to play out with the constant travel with the homestands in 2020. Like I think like in a perfect world, I love that system. Obviously, though, things don't always go to plan. Sometimes there's a pandemic, players get burned out, people don't want to travel, you can't fall asleep because you're jet lagged. There's all of these other factors that definitely would have made that a very grueling season. But I still wish that we could just kind of see how things would have turned out. Who would have been champion at the end of it all? How would the fan bases for these teams have grown when they have these, somewhat regular matches that are occurring in their cities and whatnot? It really sucks to think about like what could have been and what we were supposed to get, and how all of this turned out. Obviously, it's nothing that anybody could have done to fix it or whatever, but it's difficult to say which I think is preferable. Um, Honestly, like I think for Overwatch, just because you do have these you know regionally very different squads. Like obviously, you've got people from Europe, you've got players from China, Korea, America, Canada, etc. Like I almost, without having the travel model, would rather just go back to like the Blizzard Arena from seasons 1 and 2 and just
Right.
have it be where these teams are consistently playing against each other. Um, but maybe that does lose the excitement that comes with, it's 2 times that we get to see the international play. This is the much must watch event that everybody wants to tune in for. Um, so I guess that, yeah, I guess that's probably better for the viewership. It adds a bit more stakes because it's like, okay, we only get to go head to head every so often. People have been talking about this power balance. We've been talking about this power balance over here. Let's see who's right. I guess that overall is better. So I suppose we should keep that. But damn, I wish we had homestands. Hopefully, they're talking about having some live events. Obviously, there's a couple of the teams have already started to tease and announce. So hopefully those go really, really well. But I would love to go back and see what could happen. I think when I die, uh, if there's a heaven and if I go there, could you just show me what 2020 would have looked like if there wasn't COVID? And also, why did you create COVID? But I really am dying to just know what that would have looked like.
Right. Then we thank you for the interview. Hope that you will be there to see that next year, at least, like, I guess, a slowly starting version of that. And once again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. It's been a while since I've gotten to discuss anything Overwatch related, I suppose, but hopefully the future's looking good. Thank you for enduring my rambling, nonsensical answers at times.
No problem.